Dehradun was once a pristine town dotted with canals and fruit orchards. Today, it is choked and polluted, testament to a colossal failure of urban planning. On a warm February afternoon, as I left the traffic of Dehradun behind and drove up to the hills of Mussoorie, the voice of a presenter on an FM radio said, Dehradun is turning into Delhi. The comment caught the attention of a driver. The city has changed a lot and not in the good way. He told me it was once the capital of the hills and now it is turning into any other city in the plains like Meerut, Muzaffarnagar, etc. The famous Anglo-Indian writer Ruskin Bond, who lived in the Dehradun in the 1940s before permanently settling into Mussoorie in the 1960s, said that his favorite childhood places have disappeared in the city. Few remains like the peepal tree near the Ghantaghar. So once a pristine town dotted with canals and fruit orchards, in the last 2 decades, Dehradun has seen an exceptionally intense burst of growth that has left it crowded, polluted and water deficient. Now the canals have been cemented over, the trees have been cut. Is this how you develop a city? By destroying its true essence? Hi, this is Manuj Agarwal. Long-time Dehradun residents as well as government officials say that this downslide was accelerated after 2000, when the city was declared as the capital of the newly formed Uttarakhand state. This was also when the city's development as well as that of the 30-kilometer long Dehradun-Mussoorie road and the Mussoorie town itself became the subject of a new master plan that was intended to ensure a sustainable long-term growth. In 1984, under this Town Planning Act, Dehradun town, comprising of 172 villages, and Mussoorie, comprising of 13 villages, were brought under a newly created Mussoorie-Dehradun Development Authority. A blueprint for the next 2 decades, the Master Plan 1981 to 2001, was finalized in 1985. When this Master Plan lapsed in 2001, a new state had come into being, with Dehradun as its interim capital. Instead of strengthening its development plan, the authorities delayed drafting and implementing a new one. This delay has led to a situation where Dehradun is frequently counted among India's polluted cities. Modern Dehradun was born in somewhere around 1700s. The city gets its name from a Sikh dera, a kind of a settlement which once existed in what is now the Paltan Bazaar in the heart of the city, dedicated to Sri Guru Ram Rai. Since then, the population of Dehradun has increased in spurts. The first occurred when the railways came to Dehradun in 1904. The second after partition, when refugees from Pakistan were settled in the Premnagar area in the outskirts of Dehradun. As the population grew, more industrial units came up in the city, including textile mills, flour mills, etc. The first master plan came only 2 decades later, but the city's deterioration continued. The second master plan was particularly crucial for the city, since it covered the decades immediately after Dehradun became the capital of the new state of Uttarakhand. But the plan has had a shaky journey. It was drawn up only in 2005, 5 years after the new state was formed. It was only finalized 3 years later in 2008. It was implemented for 5 years but then amended in 2013. A city's master plan has a written portion known as the report as well as the map portion. The written portion spells out the status of the economy, the demography of the city and presents estimates of how these are likely to grow in the future. Based on these estimates, the master plan makes recommendations such as increase in residential or commercial areas, widening of inner city roads, setting aside areas for industries and commercial spaces. The map portion of the master plan divides the city into various land use categories with colors, each of which represents a different category. In 1988, Dehradun had been notified by the Environment Ministry as an eco-sensitive area, under which the Environment Protection Act of 1986 makes it mandatory for its master plans to be approved by the ministry. Shri Gildial decided to fight what we saw as flagrant violations of the law and filed a petition in the Uttarakhand High Court in 2016. He argued that the master plans did not have the required approval from the Environment Ministry and also challenged the amendments made to the plan. In June 2018, the High Court passed a judgment scrapping the plan and directing the state to obtain necessary clearances from the Environment Ministry. Meanwhile, the city's planning remained inefficient at every levels. The nuances of a master plan are in their zonal regulations. The master plan gives us a broader picture about how the ideas of a master plan will apply on the ground, but is governed by their zonal plans. In the absence of the zonal plans, an official added, it's easy to interpret the master plan in any manner possible and build anything. In 2015, we allowed an extra 3% floor area ratio to those who built green buildings under the norms of GRIHA, a reputed green building rating system. Many believe that Dehradun's ecological eco-sensitivity and the fact that it's a valley without large tracts of land to develop make it unsuitable for a capital. This is reflected in a fact that more than 20 years after the state's formation, Dehradun is still technically an interim capital. The creation of a state and Dehradun's new status as its capital led to a population boom. Between 2001 and 2011, the population of Dehradun district, in which the city is located, grew by almost 32%, which is like double the national average. Long-time residents say after that 2010, the city saw flooding and waterlogging for the first time. Meanwhile, the city's two main rivers, Rispana and Bindal, once the pride of the city, are reduced to a trickle for most of the year. Gone are the numerous trees that lined the canals that had been built during the colonial era. Also gone are the lychee orchards, tea estates, basmati fields that once defined this old colonial town. The impact is visible far beyond Dehradun city limits. The hills along the Dehradun-Mussoorie road, which were once laden with silver oak, rhododendron and sal trees, now the jungle have thinned out and is frequently punctuated with the concrete structures. Even the traffic pileups are very common. The problem of poor planning can be excavated to a state's third chief minister, Shri N.D. Tiwari, who held the post between 2002 to 2007. He is often credited with conceptualizing the industrial zone of Noida in the NCR region, and he tried to develop Dehradun and Uttarakhand in general along the same lines. Shri Jain once said, he put all the burden of the educational and the industrial infrastructure on the districts of Dehradun and Udham Singh Nagar. The rest of the hill remained untouched. As migrant labourers poured into the city to work on these new constructions, many affluent citizens of Dehradun, who were nostalgic about its tree-lined avenues, blamed the state of the city on these slums that sprung up to house them. Some of these slums were built along the rivers and are immensely vulnerable to floods. The walls of these houses are within meters of the river, and their sewage lines open directly into these waters. In 2018, the government passed a notification prohibiting the demolition of the slums along the rivers for 3 years. In 2021, this was extended by another further 3 years. Many of these new constructions along the Dehradun-Mussoorie road are now home to which are linked to institutes of higher education. Many residential complexes have come up in the area to house students. These constructions have left these hills desperately short of water and dependent on tankers. The rapid growth of Dehradun has been accompanied by a boom in the prices of land. Many locals believe that people from within the state have not benefited sufficiently from this. Planning in Dehradun is also hindered by an acute shortage of officials who should be overseeing it. The two local bodies that deal with the urban development are Town and the Country Planning Office and the Mussoorie and Dehradun Development Authority. Usually the purchase of any piece of land and the construction over it has to be approved by two different urban authorities. Once the land is bought, it is mutated or transferred to the buyer's name by the revenue department. The buildings map is approved by the development authority, which in Dehradun's case is the Mussoorie and Dehradun Development Authority. In other states, the land use is mentioned in the process of getting the mutation done. But here in Uttarakhand, a person buys the land and the revenue department is not bothered with the land use. So let's say if a person buys a piece of land, perhaps through a property dealer, in order to build a residence, but when they approach the development authority to get their plans cleared, they might end up that the land is classified as urban land intended for bus stands, markets, or maybe an agricultural land. One won't know about it till he or she goes to the MDDA to get the map sanctioned. This leads to corruption and illegal construction. Some observers saw hope in Dehradun's inclusion in the Smart City Mission, which aims to develop cities in a manner that will drive economic growth and improve the quality of life of people. While the mission should have been used for activities such as reviving the cultural heritage in the city, installing sewage and other waste treatment plants, and boosting public transport, it went towards basic construction work such as paving over canals and tarring the outer strips of road to create footpaths. Life was simple back then, from pleasant summers to scorching heat, from heavy rainfall to scanty. The clouds that hover over the busiest roads of Dehradun, like Rajpur, Raipur, Shehzar, are puffing up in enormous smoke. Few things did change for good, like the better health facilities and education centers. Some things haven't changed, like the problems of waste management, employment opportunities. Now, the same old city feels like a stranger to me. We have ruined a lot of things in the long run. But have we really developed? Or it has just become a replica of smaller, shabbier cities? So we just need to think about it. On this note, I end this conversation and hope to see you soon. Namaskar.